sexism and racism even, and homophobia, and they're all interconnected. I'll just give you a couple examples because there's so many different ways this works. Homophobia works as a very powerful policing mechanism in male peer culture to keep men silent about men's violence and abuse and mistreatment of women. Now, how does that work? When a man, for example, speaks up and challenges another man's sexism or the way he's treating women or talking to women or behaving, his heterosexuality is then often called into question. Like in other words, that guy must be gay if he's standing up for women or with women, which is really crazy when you think about it, because it doesn't survive the most basic logical scrutiny. Because think about it like this. Because we care about women, our wives, some of us have wives, like daughters, sisters, girlfriends, other women. Because we care about women, we must want to have romantic and sexual relationships with men? I'm sorry. Think about what that says about heterosexual men. In other words, if the assumption is that men who are concerned about the mistreatment of women must be gay, then heterosexual men must not care about women. It's very disturbing when you take it to its logical extension. And let me be clear. There are gay men who are strong supporters of women, and there are gay men who are not, who are every bit as abusive or misogynist as other heterosexual men. And there are there are heterosexual men who are abusive and who don't believe in women's full humanity, and there are heterosexual men who are strong supporters of women and women's full humanity. So it's not about a man's sexual orientation, whether he chooses to speak out about men's violence against women. But as a policing mechanism in male peer culture, homophobia plays a powerful role, because a lot of men make the either conscious or unconscious choice not to interrupt or speak up about other men's abuse because they fear that they will be labeled as gay. And in a culture where we have made a lot of progress in the United States and parts of the world in terms of full sort of sexual diversity rights and such, and civil rights for gay, lesbian, bisexual people, etc. But there's still stigma, there's still discrimination against, say in this case, gay men, and there's still the potential for violence, that if a man is thought to be gay, he's now in a further category of violence from other men. And so I think some men, consciously or unconsciously, decide, you know what, I don't like the way that some of my men friends are behaving towards women, but if I speak up, then I'm going to, perhaps bring upon myself some of this bad feeling and some of this potential violence, and so as a result they say nothing. So that's what I mean by homophobia being an incredibly powerful policing mechanism in male peer culture to keep men silent about sexism. And one of the ways that racism plays, I mean there's many ways, but one of the ways that racism plays, especially in white communities, is that the construction of the racialized other, those kinds of men are the ones who do these horrible things. And when I say those kinds of men, usually that's code word for men of color, African American, Latino, etc. And so a lot of white people take comfort in the idea that, oh, those men are committing these acts. Those people do this, as a way of saying it's not really about me and my community, and there's also a class bias built into some of that discussion. So people in wealthier or more financially well-off communities will say, well, this isn't really a problem in our community. It might be a problem in the poor communities, but it's not really a problem in our community, which is another way of denial, but it's also another way of shifting focus, shifting blame off of them and what choices they make. And the reality is that sexual violence certainly cuts across all the various social categories. By the way, another way that racism plays out in this discussion is that when men of color are abusive to women, some white people talk about it like this. They'll say those men, or their culture actually teaches them that. That's a cultural thing for those guys. They actually, that's how they treat their women. When white guys do it, they'll say it's a product of individual experience, bad parenting or bad childhood, or they have individual sort of sociopathological or psychopathological problems. It's rare when a white guy behaves in sexually violent or abusive ways towards women that somebody will say, oh, it's white culture. It's the cultural thing for those white people. And they'll, to me it's obvious how, race and racism in that sense distorts people's thinking, their clear thinking. So I think in sophisticated discussions about sexual violence and domestic violence, we need to be complex in our understanding of how class and race and sexual orientation play into it and intersect. We do have, I just want to say parenthetically, there's a big problem of men's sexual violence against other men. And then that's in, whether it's, and people always say, is it prisons? Yeah, it's a problem in prisons. Yes, it is a problem. It's shameful how much sexual violence is allowed to occur in prisons by men against each other and by men against women in prison, and to some extent women against women. Sexual violence by men against men is also outside of prison. There's sexual abuse of boys. I mean, look at, I have to just pick up the newspaper, these days, all over the world. The sexual abuse scandal in the Catholic Church is on the front page of the paper all over the world, and this has been going on for decades. This isn't just a scandal of the past couple of weeks. But there are sexual abuse scandals way beyond the Catholic Church in clergy from various religious denominations, coaches, teachers, other men in positions of institutional authority in the educational system, and obviously in religious institutions, in the sports culture, who have been perpetrating misuses of power, abuses of power in the sexual sense for a long time, and of course there are some female perpetrators, and people seize on those issues, right? They seize on, oh yeah, a woman does it, so it's not really a gender thing, because some teacher will be arrested for sexually assaulting, or having a statutory rape relationship with a underage boy or something, and they'll say, oh look, it's not really a gender thing, women are doing it. Meanwhile, the numbers are overwhelming in terms of male perpetration versus female perpetration, and just because some women do it doesn't mean that it's not a gender thing. It just means that it's beyond, because gender is a much more of a fluid category, and there are some women who are acting in ways that are very masculine, and just because that's the case doesn't mean it's still not fundamentally about masculinity. Again, some people get confused on the most basic points like that, but I think it's people's comfort level. A lot of people who don't really know much about these issues, their comfort level is to say, oh yeah, it's not really a gender thing because now a woman has done it. It's not really a gender thing, when in fact it's centrally a gender thing. I mean, men commit, when it comes to sexual violence, something like 98, 99% of it. So yeah, if we can point to 1 or 2% that women are perpetrating, it's okay. It's a legitimate issue, but it's like, let's keep things in perspective.